Hey everyone, welcome back to Brainstorm. This is Python for NCEA. Now in this video, we're going to take a closer look at the print function and see how we can create meaningful statements and print them out to the idle shell. Now, in the last video, we saw that we could print out strings, we could print out integers, we could print out floats. So for example, I can print out the string hello. I can print out the integer 17, and I can also print out the float 15.5. So if I save that and click F5, they print out to the idle shell. So we get the output over on this side here. Now, what would happen if I wanted to print hello and 17 together on the same line? Or what would happen if I wanted to print hello and 15.5 on the same line? Well, we haven't learned how to do that yet. So in this video, we're going to go over different techniques in order to do that. So generally, there's three different ways that we can print things together. The first way is by using the addition sign or the plus sign. So we're going to write print here. And let's say I want my output to look like, so I put a comment here. I want my output to be hello and the number 99. Okay, so maybe we even write hello player 99, for example. So I could print this all as a string, but what if I wanted to have hello player here and then a different integer 99? So this here is an integer and this here is a string. So in order to do that, one way we can do it is using the plus operator. So we're going to print the string hello player, and then I'm going to put a space here. And then if I want to put the integer 99, so not the string, but the integer, I'm going to put plus 99. Now, if I run this here, you're going to see that we're going to get an error. So click F5, you see, we can only concatenate a string to a string, right? So essentially what the idle shell is reading, we're saying add a number to a string, which doesn't really make sense. So as a result, if we want to add these together, we're going to have to make this a string. Now we're going to look at adding strings in the next video in a bit more detail. But for now, if we add two strings together, you can think that they just clump together. So we call that concatenation. So I need to make this a string object. So we looked at converting object types in the last video, but essentially we're going to put this integer 99 in the string function. And what this does is it converts 99 to the string version of 99. So now if I save this and click F5, you can see that it prints hello player 99. So if we break this down, we're getting everything except for the number 99 is being printed out by this string here. And then if we want to, and then the 99 is coming from this string 99 part here. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not very useful since I could just write this whole line as a string and print it and not worry about the hassle. And that would be true. But what if we want to use variables now? So what if the player number keeps changing? So for example, let's create a variable called player number. So player number is equal to, and I can change the player number to whatever I want. So let's say the player number is now 13. Now, if I want to print hello player 13 and 13 is stored in the variable here, now you can kind of see that it'll be more useful. So if I write hello player again plus, and if I try to add player number, well, now we're doing hello player plus 13, but 13 is an integer if you remember, and we cannot add integers and strings together. So as a result, we need to make this a string. So just like how we did before, we're going to convert player number into the string version of player number. So essentially, player number always holds an integer. It could be 1, 2, or it could be even negative. So it could be like negative 1,000, it could be 0, it could be 500,000, whatever we want, but it's still a number. And Python or our computers cannot read a number added with a string. So we always need to have two strings if we want to add them. And what this add sign means is it means bring whatever this is right next to the end of the string. So this is going to say hello player, and then 99 comes here. So that's why we have to put the space here, right? Because if I didn't have the space here, well, let's see what happens actually. So if we save this and click F5, and now prints hello player 13 without the space. So we need to have that space there to indicate, well, we want the space in order to make it more readable. So if I click F5 now, we see hello player 13. And the cool thing about using variables is I can now change the player number. So if I make the player number 5,000 and I click F5, so I click F5, now you can see it's been changed to hello player 5,000. Right, now we just saw that, well, whenever we want to print something where we are concatenating or adding two strings together, we need to put essentially our own spaces in because the Python is not smart enough to do it for us. Well, in printing technique number 2, we don't have to put the spaces in because Python is going to do it for us. So let's say I wanted to print out the statement. So I'll put a comment here. We wanted to print out the statement. It took me 5 minutes to eat a hot dog. And we want to change the number of minutes here. So we're going to store this number in a variable called minutes. So let's say minutes. So this is the name of my variable and it's equal to 5. Then I wanted to print out, it took me 5 minutes to eat a hot dog. So if we were going to use printing technique number 1, we would print it, so that should be capital, it took me, and then we want the 5. So we need to put a space added with the string version of minutes. And then we carry on the rest of the sentence. So remember that this is not going to put a space in there for us. So we have to put our own space and then minutes to eat a hot dog. If we save that and click F5, it took me 5 minutes to eat a hot dog. So that's cool. So if we're going to use printing technique number 2, it's quite similar, but in the sense we're going to put print, it took me, and instead of putting the plus sign here, we're going to put a comma. Now the cool thing about printing technique number 2 is that whenever the Python sees a comma, it's going to automatically put a space for us. So the next thing we're going to add is our minutes. So I'm just going to put minutes here. Now you might be thinking, well, why didn't I put the string version of minutes? So the cool thing about printing technique number 2 is that essentially it's printing different objects. So it knows that we're not adding them. So as a result, I don't have to convert this to a string. So in printing technique number 2, we don't have to convert everything to a string. We can just print the native object. So if this was a float, doesn't matter. It would still print the float version. If this was an integer, which it is, it's still going to print the integer version on the same line. So it took me, and that's going to say 5. I put another comma. It's going to put another space. So essentially what we have is, it took me space, 5 space. So then we're going to put minutes to eat a hot dog. So if I save this and click F5, it prints the exact same statement. But this time we didn't have to convert it to a string, and we didn't have to put our own spaces in. Now, there are a couple of things that we can do with this technique. So if I put a comma here, and I put sep is equal to, and I put these double quotation marks, what this is saying is, let's change the separator. So we can see that we have 3 different things separated like this, right? So essentially for all our different objects, when we change to the next object, how do we want to separate them? So by default, it's always a space, right? So if I save this and click F5, it's the same thing, right? If I change the separator to, let's do 3 asterisks, and I save this and click F5, you can see whenever we separate our variables, instead of putting a space, it puts 3 asterisks. So here we have, it took me asterisk, 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 5 asterisk, 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 because we've got 2 commas here. Another thing we can do is use the end. So you can do this for any of the print techniques, but we're going to put end is equal to comma, comma, and essentially what this does is it says, what do you want to do at the end of a statement? So if we put nothing, it's going to print the next thing we print on the same line. So, for example, if I put end and I put KK, click F5, well, you can see that at the very end of our sentence, it puts KK. Alright, and finally, let's take a look at printing technique number 3. Now, this technique is a little bit more advanced, but it's going to make formatting your strings a lot easier. So we start off with the print statement, And we want to print 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. So let's assume that these numbers are always the same, and we're going to store them in a variable called myNumber. So first, myNumber is equal to 5. Okay, and I want to print 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. Now we haven't calculated this, but essentially we're going to do it using the Python, using the programming that we know. So when we essentially want to represent a variable in our string, we're going to put curly braces. So 5 is the same as myNumber. So I'm going to put curly braces added with curly braces is equal to, and we're going to calculate this value here. So we're going to put this in curly braces. So anything we want to replace in our string, we put curly braces. At the end of it, we're going to put dot, and then format, and then an opening and a closing bracket. So essentially everything in here that we put is the value that we want to replace in the string. So for example, we've got 3 curly braces. So I need to put 3 things in here separated by a comma that we're going to replace into the string. So the first thing that we want to put in is myNumber, because myNumber is this variable here. So myNumber, so essentially we're putting 5 plus 5. So myNumber goes in there again, is equal to 10. Now we don't actually have the variable 10 in here, so there's a couple ways we could do it. We could calculate it in another variable, or we can just do it straight in the dot format, format method. But let's do it. Let's keep it simple. So let's say call it my sum is equal to myNumber added with myNumber. I could have also said myNumber times 2. So that's the same thing, right? So my sum. So the last thing is equal to my sum. If I save that and print it, what you're going to see is that instead of the curly braces, it replaces them with the numbers that we've put in here consecutively. So we get 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. Now, I said that we could just have done this calculation in here. So instead of putting my sum in there, I'm going to put myNumber plus myNumber. So the last thing that goes in here is myNumber plus myNumber, and Python will go ahead and calculate that for us. So if I click save and I click F5, we see 5 plus 5 is equal to 10, so it gives the exact same output. And as always, because this is a variable, I can change our numbers around. So I've put 20 here. We should get 20 plus 20 is equal to 40. So if I click F5, 20 plus 20 is equal to 40. Now, it's good to note that, like printing technique 2, we don't have to convert everything into a string, right? We can print out we can just go ahead and put in the actual object it is, and Python will sort out the rest for us, right? So for printing techniques 2 and 3, we don't have to put a string around everything that's not a string. But for printing technique 1, because we're adding the strings together, we're adding the 2 things together, we must put a string in front of anything that's not a string. But we're going to look at that in the next video. So if that doesn't make too much sense to you, don't worry. Alright, let's move on to our application questions. Now, the application questions are going to be a little bit harder than last time, but that's because I really want to show you guys how we can, even though we don't know too much about Python just yet, we can create some really powerful programs. So, as always, I'll read through the question, and then I'll give you some time to think about it. So pause the video, see if you can code out the answer, and then I'll go through it. So the first question, we want to write a program which calculates the appreciation of a stock Tesla. So the program should store the initial price, the final price, and the period of time in variables so that the program can be used many times. Then we want to calculate the appreciation in terms of a percentage. We want to print this percentage using printing technique number 1, so that's adding all the strings together. And then we want to refer to the suggested output for formatting, and I've included an example input here for development purposes. So 5 years ago, the stock price for a single share of Tesla was $39.55. Today, the stock price is $777.56. So we want to calculate essentially the percentage change between these two numbers, and I've given you the percentage change equation. So percentage change is equal to the final minus the initial divided by the initial multiplied by 100. And in the suggested output, you can see I've given you the actual percentage change, so you'll know if you're right or wrong. So pause the video and see if you can solve it, and then come back and watch out, see how I would do it. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to store the initial, final, so the initial and final price and the period of time in variables. So we're going to use the example input just for now. So the initial price was equal to $39.55. The final price was equal to $777.56. And the period of time was equal to 5 years ago, so 5 years. So we've got two floats and one integer. Now we want to calculate the percentage difference of this. So I'm going to store that in another variable. So I'm going to call that one percentage change. Oops, percentage change. So we've got the percentage change formula. It's the final minus the initial. So let's do that part first. So our final is stored in a variable called final price. So final price minus the initial price, which we've stored in a variable called initial price. So initial price divided by the initial price again. So initial price, and then that's all multiplied by 100. So the reason I've put this in brackets here is because of bed maths. So we're going to do our brackets first, then our multiplication and our division. So it's going to go calculate this, divide it, and then multiply by 100. So this is going to calculate our percentage change, and then essentially we just want to print it out using printing technique number 1. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to put our print statement here. Then we're going to say essentially all of this stuff is known here. This we've calculated in our percentage change, and this is our period of time. So essentially we're going to have to put these two values in here and convert them into strings essentially. So the first thing we do, Tesla stock saw a percentage change in stock price of, put the space there because when we add our strings together we don't get a space there. So of 188 oh sorry, that's our percentage change, right? And we've calculated the percentage change here. So this is our percentage change. We're going to put add percentage change. That gets added with a space, because remember when we add our strings, Python doesn't put the spaces in for us. So actually we should not put a space there. The reason for that is we need to put the percentage sign first. So percent space over a, and we want to put a 5. No, we don't want to put 5 because 5 is the period of time, and the period of time can change depending on what we put in here. So I'm just going to put this onto a new line. You don't have to do that. It's just so that I have more space to write. So if you want to put code onto a new line, you just put the forward space and then click enter, and then it will read this as one whole line. Anyway, percentage over a, we want to put the number here. So we're going to have to add, and then we want to add the period of time. So we're going to put the variable period of time, and then we're going to add again. We need to put our space in, and then year period, and full stop. So if I save this and run this, what do you think is going to happen? Well, it's actually going to give me an error. So if I click F5, we're going to get an error, and you can see that it says cannot concatenate a string, or cannot concatenate a float, sorry, to a string. So what's that saying? It's saying that this is a float and we cannot add it to a string. So I need to convert all my variables to a string. So I'm going to convert this to a string by passing it into the string function. So remember that's str and then an open and a close bracket. So this converts this number here into a string, or this float into a string. And we need to convert the years into a string as well. So we're going to do the exact same thing. So if I save that and click F5 now, you can see that it does almost the exact same thing. So Tesla stock saw a percentage change in stock price of 1,866 point, all these decimal points, percent over a 5-year period. Now you can see in my program, it only prints to 2dp. So we need to round our percentage change. And we want to round it to 2 decimal places. So remember last video, we saw that we could use the round function to round floats down. So percentage change. So we want to change the value inside of percentage change. Percentage underscore change. So we've already said that percentage change is this number up here. So we want to take this number and round it down. So we're going to round percentage change. So we're rounding itself down, and we're going to put a comma, and we put the number of decimal places we want to round down to, which is 2. So if we save this and run it, we should get what's in the suggested output. So if we click F5, Tesla stock saw a percentage change in stock price of 1,866.02% over a 5-year period. So this is really cool. And I can now change the initial price, the final price, and the period of time, and it's going to make the relevant changes in the idle shell. What's most important is that what we've printed here makes sense to the reader, right? So it's not just one value, but it's it's meaningful text essentially. So for example, I could change the initial price to 5, or actually let's make the initial price 1,000, and let's make the final price 5. So we're going to get a negative percentage change, right? Because we're going from something high to something low. So we've lost money, and let's say the period of time was over 2 years. If I click F5 now, you can see that it calculates that percentage change for me. So Tesla stock saw a percentage change in stock price of negative 99.5% over a 2-year period. Now, I hope you can see that even though we don't understand too much about Python just yet, we've created a program which we could actually use in real life. Alright, question 2. We want to write a program which prints a statement. First, the program stores your name in a variable called myName. The program then stores your age in a variable called myAge. Then the program stores your favorite food in a variable called myFavoriteFood. Print all the variables using printing technique number 2, so that's with the commas, and see the suggested output for formatting. And your program should capitalize my_name. So give it a go. Note that we haven't actually looked at how we're going to do that. So don't worry about implementing that yourself. I'll go over it. So first thing we want to do, also pause the video here, and then come back. So the first thing we want to do is store your name in a variable called myName. So myName is equal to Joe. So I'm just going to use the example input here. We're going to store my age, and then you're going to put your own age in. In this case, it's 32. And we're going to store my fave food, and you're going to put your favorite food. In my case, it's a juicy zinger burger. And we have to be careful here. So I've written these here, but I haven't put the quotation marks in. So if I was to run this, it would give an error. So remember that whenever we write a string of letters, we need to put quotation marks here. Now my age is a number, so it makes sense to leave it as an integer, but a juicy zinger burger is also a string. The next thing we want to do is we want to print all the variables together using printing technique number 2. So essentially we're going to put my name is, and then put the variable, I am, put the variable, years old, and my favorite food is, put the variable, and then a full stop. So using printing technique 2, I'm going to put print my name is. We don't have to put the spaces in, because we're using this technique, whenever we see a comma, Python's going to do it for us. So my name is comma. We're going to put the variable name, so my_name. Then we put another comma and we continue. So it goes my name. Then we've got a comma in the terms of the string, so we need to put a comma. I am, and we don't need to put the space there. 32, which is the variable my age. So we're going to put a comma, my age, and the comma, make sure that you put it outside of the quotation marks. So inside the quotation marks is going to be printed to the screen. Outside the quotation marks means we're essentially saying, okay, this is the end of this object. Let's move on to another object. I am my age. So I am my age, comma, new string, 30. So we've just put 32. This is put in the space, and we want to put years old, and my favorite food is, and then we want to put another comma, and then we want to put my underscore fave underscore food. So it's going to put a space here, and it's going to put my fave food, and then we would just want to end with a full stop. So we're going to have to put another comma, then we're going to have to put a full stop there. So if we print this, it's not going to give me the exact same output here, because just for example, we've put your favorite food, so it's going to print your favorite food, then it's going to see a comma, it's going to print a space and then a full stop. So if I click F5, starting from this line, my name is Joe, and it's put a space here, which we didn't want. I am 32 years old, and my favorite food is a juicy zinger burger, and we've got another space here. So that's not quite the output that we're looking for. So I'm just going to move this onto a new line. So how do we get over this? Well, in this case, we're going to have to change the separator value. So remember I talked about the separator value up here. So the separator value, we're going to have to change it from being a space by default to being nothing by default. And then we're going to have to manually add in our spaces. So here we are. So we're going to have to put in our own separator value. So we're going to say sep is equal to, and by default, it looks like this. So we're going to put no space in between. So if we save that now, you can see that it's got rid of all the spaces in between the variables. So as a result, we're going to have to add them in. So my name is Joe. So my name is, let's put a space there. We need to put, that looks okay. I am, put a space here. So I am space 32, another space, years old. And my favorite food is space. So if we print this now, we see my name is Joe. I am 32 years old, and my favorite food is a juicy zinger burger. So this is almost the same as here, but remember that we need to capitalize my name. So the way that we do that is we do my name, and we have the function or a method called .upper. Actually, .upper will change all of it to caps locks. So we have a few functions. So we've got .upper, we've got my name .lower, and we've got my name .capitalize, which I think we know which one we're going to want to use. So my name changes every letter in the string to the uppercase version. The lower changes everything to lowercase, and capitalize just changes the first letter to a capital. So we wanted to capitalize the name, so we're just going to use this function here. So I could make a new variable and put my name.capitalize in there. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put it straight into what we're printing here. So it's going to print my name.capitalize, and I haven't tried it out, but I hope it works. And as you can see, it goes in my name is the capitalized version of Joe. I am 32 years old, and my favorite food is a juicy zinger burger. So as you can see, it was a little bit annoying having to put the sep in and put our own spaces in. So in question 3, you're going to see that we don't actually have to do that. Okay, let's take a look at our final question, question 3. An object has an initial velocity of 5 meters per second. First, store the name of an object in a variable called myObject. If the object travels for 20 seconds and has an acceleration of 3.4 meters per second, calculate the distance traveled. Store the distance in a variable called myDistance, and then print the variable using printing technique 3. And let's have a look at our suggested output for any formatting. And we should use the physics formula d is equal to the initial velocity multiplied by time added with 0.5 multiplied by the acceleration multiplied by the time squared. Okay, now obviously this isn't physics class, right? So if you're a bit confused with the equation here, don't worry, I will try to guide you through it. Essentially, we're just going to be doing a whole bunch of substitution with our variables. So first, store the name of an object in a variable called myObject. So in this case, the object is a soccer ball. So myObject is equal to the string soccer ball. And I can change my object to different things. So I could make it a water bottle. I could make it a, I don't know, a calculator or something like that. Next thing we want to do is we want to calculate the distance traveled using this formula. So we're going to make it easier by storing all the components of this formula in variables, and then we're just going to calculate the distance after that. So the first thing is the initial velocity. So initial velocity is equal to, and let's scan through and find out what the initial velocity was. And an object has an initial velocity of 5 meters per second. So it's 5. Next thing. Here. So what's the time taken? The object travels for 20 seconds. So the time is 20. So time is equal to 20. So I've stored 20 seconds in a variable I've called time. Next thing we need to know is the acceleration. So let's scan through for the acceleration, which is so we had an acceleration of 3.4 meters per second per second. So I'm going to create a variable called acceleration, and that's equal to 3.4. And final variable is time, but we've already stored time in a variable here, so we don't need to do it again. Now let's calculate our distance. So distance, and we want to store the distance in a variable called my distance. So I'm going to put it my underscore distance, and then we're going to go ahead and calculate it using the formula. So the initial velocity multiplied by the time taken, so that's stored in a variable called time. That's added with 0.5 multiplied by the acceleration, which we've called acceleration. So we've called it a variable acceleration here, multiplied by the time taken squared. So our variable time, and we're squaring it. So remember that we need to put 2 asterisks to say squared. So if you want to put in brackets, that's fine. But actually, because of the bed mass, we're going to calculate this first, and then it's going to do these 2 or these 3 here, and then finally add them. So we actually don't need to put brackets in. So if we print my distance just to check that we've done it correctly, save it and click F5, you can see we get 780.0. So that's good. So now all that we have to do is format it. So instead of printing my distance like that, we want to print the string, the distance traveled by and we're putting the name of the object, which we've stored in our own string here. So using printing technique number 3, whenever we want to put our own variable name in it, or a different object, we put curly braces. So we put traveled by the curly braces was, then the distance, which is curly braces, and then meters. Then what we do is at the end of the quotation mark, we put dot format, an opening and a closing bracket, and then wherever we see curly braces, we want to replace it with the object that we want to put in there. So the distance traveled by what do we want to put in here? Well, we want to put the object, which we've stored in a variable called my object. So we're going to put my object in here. And the second, we've got 2 curly braces, so we need to put in 2 different things separated by a comma. The second thing was the distance traveled. So we're going to put my underscore distance. If I click save and click F5, the distance traveled by the soccer ball was 780 meters. Now, as you can see, using formatting technique number 3 is a lot easier because I don't have to go through and specify the separator. I don't have to make sure I put the spaces in the right place. I can simply write the statement and then just put curly braces where I want to replace something. Awesome, guys. Thanks for checking out this video on printing, and stick around for the next video. Cheers.